Saturday marks the second matchup ever between Tennessee and ETSU, but starting quarterback Joey Aguilar has already played ETSU. In fact, played him this time last year, and he balled out.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome into it, your Thursday morning Locked On Vols. I'm your host, Cain. Appreciate you guys for being here and making Locked On Vols a part of your morning routine, your first listen, your first watch each and every single morning. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you in part by our friends over at Mazda. Just like there's more to every player, more dedication, more attention to detail, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Stay tuned in later in this episode for highlights of this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. I'm your host, Cain. Appreciate you guys for being here. I'm a part of the VolQuest.com team here in town, covering your Tennessee Volunteers, and today's episode is going to be a fun one. Busy as well. ETSU voice, radio voice, Jay Sandos is going to join us in segment number 2 to talk a little bit about the Buccaneers, give us a scout on the visiting East Tennessee State Buccaneers. Throwback Thursday with Neyland Press Corps' Noah Taylor. Really fascinating story about the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II earlier this week and how that affected the University of Tennessee football back in the 1940s. But first, Joey Aguilar, Tennessee starting quarterback, will be taking on ETSU for the second time in as many years. It was the season opener last year for for Appalachian State's Joey Aguilar, and it was on the road. Actually, it was at home. Gosh, I keep forgetting. I'm all over the place. Joey Aguilar's moved around a little bit. This game was in Boone, North Carolina, so it was at home for Joey Aguilar, of course, a member of Appalachian State. And he absolutely balled out against ETSU. And it's not like Tennessee needs Joey Aguilar to be phenomenal against ETSU in order for Tennessee to get the win on Saturday. Now, that's something you want to see. Don't get me wrong, right? Like, you want to see Joey continue to progress. You want to see this team take a step from week 1 to week 2. You want to see this team clicking on all cylinders, of course, because you know what's happening next week, right? It's Georgia at home at Neyland Stadium. So you want to see Joey Aguilar go into that game with a whole lot of confidence, for sure. But I think it is worth noting that Tennessee's only played ETSU one time in the history of the two programs. That was back in 2018, where it was Jeremy Pruitt's first win as Tennessee's head coach. That's kind of funny. But Joey Aguilar will be playing ETSU in the second time in as many years. And in that game last year, he absolutely balled out. This is week 2. This was the opener last year for Joey Aguilar against ETSU. He went 22 of 36, 326 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He also ran for 19 yards and had 2 touchdowns as well. So Joey Aguilar scored 4 total touchdowns, threw for over 300 yards, and had no turnovers against ETSU in that season opener. Was pretty good, right? In that game, Joey Aguilar, according to Pro Football Focus, graded out at 74.7%, which was his fourth highest grade of the season. He graded out at 91.6 against Georgia State on 69 plays. He graded out at 76.5 against Dominion on 59 plays, 76.1% against James Madison on 62 plays, and 74.7% against East Tennessee State University on 70 plays to kick off the season. So pretty impressive work there for Joey Aguilar last year against the Bucs. You look at it a little closer, and it was the first touchdown of the year. It was not even 3 minutes into the game. And remember Joey's impressive 2023 campaign, right? Sun Belt Newcomer of the Year, first team All Sun Belt quarterback. I mean, he took that lead by storm, right? So already coming in with so much preseason hype, and not even 3 minutes into the new season last year, it was an 83-yard touchdown pass from Joey Aguilar to Christian Horn. 83 yards to the house, and Appalachian State took a 7-0 lead early on. And when I talk with Jay Sandos here in a moment, he's going to reference that. He's like, hey, Joey Aguilar played this last year. He hit one big over the middle early in the game, and that kind of set the tone in that game. And so he's already had tons of success down the field passing against ETSU. So 83 yards to the house. It was a house call from Joey Aguilar to Christian Horn. 83 yards last year got the scoring going. Joey Aguilar in the second quarter had a 1-yard touchdown rush. to make the score 17-0. In the third quarter, Joey Aguilar found Eli Wilson for a 34-yard touchdown pass. That made the score 24-10 in favor of Appalachian State. And then later on in the fourth quarter, again, Joey Aguilar, a 1-yard touchdown run. It was the final score of the game to make it 38-10 in favor of Appalachian State. So again, Joey Aguilar, pretty phenomenal numbers last year against ETSU. And 4 total touchdowns, 22 of 36, 326 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. 4 total touchdowns, 2 through the air, and 2 on the ground. And that's a point of emphasis that I really liked about Joey Halsley and this offensive coaching staff in game number 1, right? They had some new wrinkles. They called some design runs for Joey Aguilar. And, Joey Aguilar on that second drive of the season before Peyton Lewis punched in there for a touchdown, man, he had a 25-yard scramble out of the pocket, eyes downfield, 25-yard scramble to really set the tone for Tennessee in that game. So I liked it. And I don't think anybody's going to be going in with super nerves, right? Like maybe against Georgia. But I do think it's kind of unique that Joey Aguilar has already seen ETSU and he's already absolutely balled out. So what could Joey Aguilar's numbers look like post-Saturday? What could his numbers look like? Will he have 4 total touchdowns? Will it be 4 total touchdowns over 300 yards passing, just like it was a year ago? I don't know. We'll see. But I found that pretty cool nonetheless. So you look at what Joey Aguilar did, that season for Appalachian State. And, he had a couple of turnovers, no doubt. I know we're talking specifically about the ETSU game. But you go back to 2023. 4 touchdowns in his first career game. Remember, he came in the first half for an injured quarterback against Gardner-Webb. He was 11 for 13, 4 touchdowns, and 174 yards. His first start was that next week in 2023 at North Carolina against a Power 4 opponent. He was 22 of 43, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, 275 yards. Not bad, 42 yards on the ground. High water marks on the year. He threw for 4 touchdowns, 1, 2, 3 times. Threw for 4 touchdowns and 1 pick against Southern Miss. 391 yards passing against Southern Miss. That's pretty impressive. 296 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick against Georgia Southern. That's the game that he graded out the highest. And his high water mark for passing on the season, again, I just mentioned it was 391 against Southern Miss. Outside of that, 318 against James Madison, 305. Coastal Carolina, 335. ULM. Yeah, pretty good year. Pretty daggone good year there for Joey Aguilar back in 2023. And then, of course, kicking off that 2024 season where he had tons of hype against ETSU, where he was just phenomenal. So let's continue learning about the Bucs, this year's ETSU Buccaneers. What stands out about the Bucs? No better person to tell us than the voice of the Buccaneer Sports Network, and that is Jay Sandos. He's going to join us when we come back right here on your Thursday morning Locked On Vols. Stay tuned. Hey, Tennessee fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use the limited time promo code FOOTBALL and get an extra 25 cents per gallon back on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas that you already need. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, e-gift cards, Amazon, and other brands. Don't let this offer drive by. Download the free Upside app now using the limited time promo code FOOTBALL for a limited time 25 cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code FOOTBALL. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for full terms and conditions. Big shout out to Upside. And now I'll talk about the Mazda moving the game forward. Again, it's brought to you by those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. Because these moments do more than win. They push what's possible. They remind us to go that extra yard, shift into that extra gear, and keep moving forward. This week's Mazda Move the Game Forward Player of the Week is Star Thomas. I thought Star Thomas was really good, man. Like, He was Tennessee's third option in the backfield. He had 49 yards on his touchdown scoring drive there towards the end of the ball game. He led Tennessee overall with 92 yards from scrimmage, averaging 7.7 yards per carry. Star Thomas brings experience, he brings versatility, and he brings a lot of leadership to the Tennessee backfield. That's what keeps fans and players alike moving forward, always chasing that next great moment, and that's kind of what Star Thomas was doing against Syracuse. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like that, there's more to every highlight. There's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Pleased to be joined by the voice of the ETSU Bucs, Jay Sandos. Has been doing it for about 20-plus years now, and only the second all-time meeting ever coming up this Saturday between Tennessee and East Tennessee State University. Kind of surprising, but it should be exciting for a lot of the folks here, especially in East Tennessee.
Yeah, I think, like a lot of places around the state, whether you're Chattanooga, Austin Peay, UT Martin, name an FCS school, Tennessee Tech, they probably have a fan base that pulls for both, because in reality, they don't compete against each other very often. Just the second time, on the football gridiron, but in most sports really don't compete. So I think it's a fun game for most fans that they get a chance to see both teams. Maybe there's a little bit of a torn allegiance, but as I say, if you're a fan of Austin Peay or UT Martin of ETSU for 1 week, maybe pull for that team. After that, you can pull for the Vols. Unless you're Chattanooga, then you should always pull for Tennessee. But other than that, I think, this will just be fun, because there's a lot of kids that grew up watching Tennessee, because we have a lot of in-state Tennessee kids that get a chance to do something that, not a lot of people get to do, which is play in front of 100,000 people.
So tell us about ETSU's Week 1 win over Murray State. Beat them pretty handily, rushed for almost 400 yards. A lot of successful things happened last week. And what was kind of the takeaways from the opening week for the Bucs?
Well, I think for the fan base, the biggest question was two quarterbacks, right? How's that going to work with Cain McNamara transferring in from Michigan and Iowa, Jacoby Criswell from North Carolina and Arkansas? They were going to split time. How's that going to look? And early, McNamara first drive down the field in this field goal, then an unfortunate deflected ball should have been caught, led to interception. Criswell comes in, two drives, 2 touchdowns. They go back to McNamara. He leads a couple scoring drives, and then it kind of alternated. 24-3 first quarter. I think the Bucs felt good. Lackluster start second half, to be honest with you. 2 big miscues. Kicked the ball out of bounds, start the second half, and a fumble, missed assignment on a blindside rusher, led to a forced fumble, and all of a sudden Murray State cut it from a 21-point game to 7. But the good news for ETSU, next 3 straight drives, they were able to take care of business. And I think it's one of those weird things. Like, I don't think Coach Healy wanted that lapse to start the third quarter, but I think it was good to see that and see how they recovered. But they wanted to run the football, and they wanted to run very fast tempo, and they executed that. A lot of things to be cleaned up, but I think every team in the country could look at Week 1 and say there's a lot of things to clean up. Clearly this week, a different weight class they're fighting in.
So I would assume that they're going to continue with the 2-quarterback system. They're going to play both those former Division I power, 4 starting quarterbacks that ETSU is blessed to have. And aside from that, the tempo. I'm sure you're very familiar with Tennessee's tempo offensively. Where does the tempo relate on that scale?
Well, they want to, very similar to Tennessee, they don't really want to get the play clock below, 20 seconds. I mean, they want to be 20, 25 seconds, snap the football, maybe even less. Now, some of that is dictated by, the opponent and score and some things, but they want to go warp speed like a lot of people, try to have a big play, run down the field, snap it for the defense, has a chance to catch its breath or, to substitute. But the laughing part for Coach Healy is like, well, we were able to do that against Murray State, who had 60-plus freshmen in the game last week. Now you're going to go up against a team that goes against it and has gone against it for, 5-6 years now, very used to that style. So not going to be as much an advantage. Plus, obviously, the depth at Tennessee is obviously when you play FBS, FCS, and not so much that, but then the SEC and Big Ten schools and such, the depth there, 1 through 120 compared to what ETSU has isn't even comparable. So, they can roll in 4 and 5 stars left and right. So I don't know that ETSU will warp speed the whole game. I do think they'll try to pick some spots that they'll try to do so. But I think like a lot of teams, when you're probably outmatched, you probably want to take the air out of the ball in certain instances just to make sure you're giving your defense a chance to get a breather.
Again, almost ran for about 400 yards in Week 1 against Murray State. Who were some of these skilled players that Tennessee fans need to be looking out for, both in the backfield, which I think, had 6 players rushed for at least 30 or 40 yards in the opener. And I know one of the quarterbacks is in there as well. But, wide receiver, tailbacks, who are some of those offensive skill that Tennessee defenders are going to have to channel in on?
Well, I think it starts with a running back, the reigning Southern Conference Player of the Week, and Devonte Houston. He was at Connecticut prior to ETSU, had a couple 100-yard games for them. The big thing about him is his speed. I think there was a lot last year that he had an 80-yard run against Appalachian State, and he ran away from some people. He's got legit kind of go-home speed. I think the staff, when they came in, was like, hey, we've been in Central Florida, we've been at Ole Miss, Georgia State. Like you say, he's a 4.4, but a lot of guys say that. I think they've been impressed with his speed. A little bit shifty in power back, considering he's only about 180 pounds. But they have a couple Division I transfers as well. Jason Albritton is a lot like Mike Allstott. He's 5'9", about 230. He transferred from Ole Miss, where he did get playing time there. They got another transfer from Coastal Carolina and Grand Valley State junior college transfer. They run all 4 backs. I'll do something different. So it's very much schematically when those guys get in the game and what they want to do. Same thing with the receivers. They got a couple guys that really can run, a freshman and Jeremiah Hairston, whose nickname is Scar. So he's a guy that got his first action last week, 3 catches, 56 yards, and a touchdown. They get Hakeem Meggett back, a big 6'4" deep threat that did not really play last week, coming off an injury. And then they got a couple smaller speeder slot receivers, and Ephraim Floyd is a guy that's going to come in, and then a 7th-year transfer, Sterling Gablin from UMass. So they'll mix some things up. The other position is tight end, Charlie Browder, who was at Tennessee last year, a local kid out of Kingsport. They were able to find him over the middle. And then they have a 6'5" former wide receiver from Washburn University in Cole Keller. So they go 6'7", 6'5" at tight end, just try to get some mixed matches, play action, kind of throw over the top, let those guys get it. But it's very much, there's not really a base. It's basically, different formations, different schemes, different things they want to do with different people. So it's a lot like the new age of college football. You really don't line up with the same couple wide receivers, running backs, and heck, for ETSU, and the same 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's flip it over to the defensive side of the football. What is ETSU going to try to accomplish? What schematically? Everybody's multiple nowadays, but obviously a good showing in week 1. But what is ETSU going to try to accomplish on the defensive side of the football on Saturday?
Well, I hate to be generic here, but I'm sure it's stop the run first and try to see what you could do. And I think that the big thing, they held Murray State to 34 yards. They are probably better up front than the back end, and that's a little scary because ETSU played Joey Aguilar last year, opening game at Appalachian State. He had a couple home run balls down the middle of the field last year. Obviously, he connected on at least one at Syracuse last week. So I think that's a major concern for ETSU on the back end. So if you can take away the run, like a lot of teams. If you can make them one-dimensional, now, again, that's so easy to say, but you're going up against one of the better offensive lines in all of college football, and they're even going to get better, I believe, with the freshman might be back in that right tackle. So I think it's going to be tough. I will say there is one guy that's very impressive for ETSU's number 22, Nick Hunter, 6'4.5", almost 6'5", 190 pounds. One of those outside linebackers that's kind of a creative position. They call him the jack linebacker, but I grew up in the old 3-4. Sometimes he's a stand-up end. Sometimes he's back in coverage. But he's 6'4", 190, and the impressive thing about him is just how athletic and how strong he is. And talked to several folks, former coaches at ETSU, basically said if he could gain 20, 30 pounds, he'd be playing somewhere else. But because he's about 190 pounds, he doesn't get a lot of look, but he jumps off the page. Last year he had 2 interceptions where he was rushing the quarterback and they tried to get rid of the football, and he just leaped up in the air and intercepted it at the point of attack. So also his speed is quite there. So he's kind of the athlete of the group that I think you can pay attention to, that hey, he may jump off the page as a guy that might be a higher level guy for ETSU compared to maybe some of his counterparts he's playing with.
Yeah, I was going to say 6'4", 190, playing that position. There is a lot of room to pack on, 30 pounds or something, of muscle there and still be as effective. So there's a lot of room to grow there for him for sure. Will Healy, you're number 1 in the system. Trey Lamb came in 1 year, really good offense. 7-5 was the record. He takes the Tulsa job. So what's the experience with Will Healy been like so far? I know it's in the early going, but a guy that's got tons of head coaching experience. Yeah,
to be it's funny. We actually got older from 34 years old to 39 years old from Trey to Will. So it's kind of funny. Guys are younger than me now, and I'm not even that old. So I think the big thing is energy. He's real big on matching his energy. Because, you always hear the two things you can control is effort and energy. You hear that from about every coach, no matter what sport you play. It's the two things you can do. But he preaches that every day and does it himself. I was actually impressed. He almost walked Devonte Houston down on a 50-yard run down the sideline, just chasing him down. So he's all over the place. He's an energy guy. He's a high-five guy. He's I don't know, it's real weird. He's like a gnat. He's just kind of all over the place, a little bit annoying people and going this, that, and other. But it's just infectious, his love of the game and his energy. And you can see it in practice. Like, they're going through the drill and they're not having a good time. He'll jump in the drill, do it with them, try to knock somebody down. And I think he even cut his head open earlier this year. I mean, he's just all about like the energy and, hey, we make a good play. It should be celebrated, right? This is fun. Defense, you want to do this. Offense, you want to do this. And getting guys just to buy in. I know that's such a popular, term nowadays. Are they buying in? Are they doing that? But I think you can tell early on some of the team building they did and his vision for the program. I think you can clearly see that they are really playing for their head coach, Will Healy, and they'll continue to grow. But being game 2, there's still a lot of room of growth. Also, Cam Aiken, the offense coordinator, last week was his first week calling plays ever. So brand new offense coordinator, first time ever calling plays. He's obviously, going to be challenged this week against Tim Banks and that defense. And, that's one of the better pass rushers in all of the SEC is getting the quarterback 5 sacks last week. It's concerning because ETSU, like a lot of transfer portal error, they had 5 guys never played together last week. Matter of fact, none of them had played together until last week. So trying to get them back on the same page is going to be a challenge for the offense coordinator, Cam Aiken. And then just getting Coach Healy, keeping the guys in the right mindset, depending on how the game may or may not go early.
Last question, you kind of touched on this at the top. You're going there. I mean, everybody knows it's it's one of those pay games. It's from a Tennessee perspective, like the fan base might say, this is kind of one of those quote unquote cupcake games. But all these teams do this across the country. Still, I mean, ETSU is going in there trying to win the football game, but also that roster littered with guys from the state of Tennessee, littered from guys in this region. What's the challenge in like going in this game if you're ETSU for some of those players to take in the moment and celebrate the moment of where they are, where they're playing, because they probably grew up Tennessee fans as well, but also just trying to say, hey, I'm here to do a job.
Yeah, I think that's 100%. You want them to take in the moment because it's an opportunity for an FCS level to go play. And we do have more FBS transfers than we've ever had before, and Power 4 FBS transfers that we've never had before. So a lot of those guys have seen it, but there's still 80 guys plus that have never been in that environment, never seen it. You want them to soak in. It's a selling point for ETSU. They're going to play Georgia the next few years. They'll be at North Carolina, Florida State, and that's part of the deal. Yes, we get a paycheck, but yes, it's an opportunity for those guys just to play in that type of environment and showcase what they can. That being said, we've been a part of this for a long time. So same thing with ETSU playing a non-Division I. Depending on how you come out and play and how the other team plays, it could be a 21-0 deficit early and it be a name your score game boat race. Or you can kind of hang in there to halftime, and then probably the depth wears you down in the second half, and it turns into a 21-point game at that point. So that there is the 0.00001% where the FCS team is magically pull off upset, right? That's unlikely. So I think it's just enjoy the moment, but you also don't want them to get overwhelmed in the moment. You want them to compete. And then when the score's a little out of hand, you probably want everyone to stay healthy. Tennessee, same thing. I'm sure they want to get their work in. They would love to be up 3 or 4 scores going into the fourth quarter, let some other guys play. ETSU would love to be 14 down, maybe and go in the fourth quarter, have a puncher's chance. But in reality, if they're not, I think the same thing. They want to get some extra guys some work, and they certainly want to make sure they're healthy going into what for Tennessee is a huge game the following week, and for ETSU, a couple non-conference games before they start their SoCon play.
Awesome stuff. Jay Sandos, the play-by-play voice, radio broadcast for ETSU, the Bucs. Been doing it for quite some time. Jay, again, a lot of crossover. I've talked to some people all week long saying, hey, I've graduated from both schools. What do I do? I'm like, do whatever the heck you want to do, right? I mean, you've earned that right. A lot of people are going to be listening. What time do you guys get on the air Saturday morning?
So we get on 2 o'clock. We're a 90-minute pregame show, so we'll be on leading up to that, and then coverage, obviously, at 3:30. And that same thing I told everybody too. Hey, for 1 week, you're a Buck fan. You can, if somebody does good, you just clap for everybody. I said, but after it's over, you can still pull for both. Still pull for Tennessee, still pull for ETSU. This is 1 week you might be a little conflicted. Hopefully they wear the blue and gold, but I'll certainly understand if they're wearing orange.
Jay, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much, and look forward to seeing you down there at Neyland Stadium this week.
Yeah, anytime, Eric. Thanks, buddy.
It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown last week's MVP on who delivered. Powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Tennessee, Nathan Robinson delivered in a big way. Early in the game, first drive for Syracuse, third down, Nathan Robinson smacked Steve Angeli on a third down throw, forcing an incompletion, and Tennessee, of course, took over after the punt. That was a huge play. On the scoop and score touchdown for Colton Hood there in the second quarter, or into the first quarter, that 22-yard scoop and score, Nathan Robinson is the one that poked the ball loose out of Steve Angeli's hands. I mean, it was phenomenal work, right? Nathan Robinson was all over the field. When the pressure was on, he came through, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching throughout fall camp, the performance is not a fluke, right? Nathan Robinson is on a heater. And just like that, Nathan Robinson delivered for the Tennessee Volunteers. DoorDash delivers for your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order, and stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive. Fuel for your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period ending November the 18th. Throwback Thursday right here on Locked On Vols each and every week with Noah Taylor, Neyland Press Corps. And if you have not given him a follow on Twitter, he posts some awesome articles, awesome videos. He's been doing that for quite some time. But go ahead and make sure you're linked up to his Substack. He puts out awesome stories like he did earlier this week on Tuesday, and that's what we're going to talk about today. 80 years ago Tuesday, the end of World War II, and it wasn't just the United States engulfed in a worldwide war, right? It affected everything. It affected the economy. It affected the households. It affected college football. And Tennessee's football program was actually on hiatus for the 1944 season. And there's a lot that kind of went into it, man. But I got to start from the top. And anybody that hasn't read this yet, I encourage you to go do so. The Substack link is in my in the show notes of the show. You start off by talking about a Tennessee tailback that scored a touchdown in the Sugar Bowl. And you talk about a lineman who blocked for him. And then you go in and said 8 months later, football will be shelved. 2 years later, those two men would be falling on the battlefield. And that just really kind of hit me hard, man. I mean, war's ugly, but it's like you got these two kids playing football, and then they're called to go serve their country, and they don't make it home. And I know there's other examples. There's 4 former Tennessee football players you highlight in this story. That really just kind of hit me home, man. Like that's real life stuff that we don't even. We're so blessed. We don't even think about that nowadays, 100 or 80 years later, right?
Yeah, it was a different time for sure. And when I found that kind of connection, it's kind of heavy, like you said. That you go from such a big moment in your football career, you put it on hold for the service of your country, and you don't make it back. And it started with Clyde Fuson in that 1943 Sugar Bowl game against Tulsa on New Year's Day, 43. Rudy Clark was blocking for him in that game. Bill Noling and Willis Tucker were the other two Vols to sign up, and they were all 4 were killed in the European theater. And if you've been to Neyland Stadium a lot, you notice their names there in the corner there, the south, kind of the south end of the stadium.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely a different time, and I think I told you before we hopped on the pod here there was just so much information about this era of Tennessee football that it was almost overwhelming to write, because you don't want to leave guys out, and certainly it starts with those 4 guys and what they sacrificed. But Tennessee had kind of 1941 in the late 30s. It was a ton of success. 1938 was probably Neyland's best team. Tennessee went to the Orange Bowl and beat Oklahoma. 39 was a really good team as well that went to the Rose Bowl, and their only loss that season was to Southern Cal. But then in 1941, in the offseason, Neyland's called back into service, and he has to go back in and start training soldiers for the war, which this is 8 months before Pearl Harbor. The United States wasn't in yet. You could kind of read the tea leaves with what Germany was doing in Europe. They invaded Russia about a month after General Neyland had been called back, which at the time he was a colonel, had been called back into service. So John Barnhill was the guy. He had played for Neyland, and he was on his staff already. They made him the interim coach, and it was a ton of success under Barnhill. 42, obviously they make it to the Sugar Bowl. 43, college football goes on hiatus. 44, Tennessee goes back to the Rose Bowl and loses to Southern Cal. 45, the war ends. Kind of going a long timeline here, but then Neyland comes back in 1946 and kind of finds what I wrote in the story, really his most challenging coaching job, I think, because you don't really think about it, but when those guys come back from the war, you had a ton of guys who left while in the middle of their college careers, so they still had eligibility left. And at this point, these are battle-hardened soldiers. These are guys who've seen kind of the worst that you could see as a young man. Now they're in their mid to late 20s. There's a quote in there about from one of the players, we're married, we have kids now, and we're showing up at football practice, and Neyland's still treating us like freshmen. And that was a challenge there, and so 74 guys are on that 1946 team. I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but 21 of them, I believe, were returning veterans. And then you had about 8 holdovers from the 1945 team, and then the rest were freshmen. So you didn't really have the age range was 17 to 26. And you didn't have a lot of guys to gap that bridge. So it was a challenge for him to try to get back and get back to the success he had early on in his career. But, he had quoted when he got back to Knoxville that, it would be a 5-year project to get Tennessee back. And he met that timeline perfectly.
Yes, he did. A lot of success that came, shortly after he returned for the second time. I remember at Carson Newman, as I bring this back to make it all about myself, I remember at Carson Newman I played with a guy. He was a veteran. I think he was just there for like 1 year. But he was older. Like when we were like 18, 19, he came in, he was like 20, 28. And I'll never forget, like as an 18, 19-year-old, I'm just sitting here, I'm like, man, this guy is like, he's a man. He's seen things. I don't know if he was married and I can't remember, but like he was so much farther along in life than the rest of us, right? And I was like, man, it's got to be so difficult for him. So going to war and then coming back, and I mean, there's so many metaphors and comparisons to like, oh, it's a battlefield out there, we're in the trenches. There's so many football to war metaphors, and I mean, like we get the reference, but like those guys literally lived it, and then come back. Play a silly little game called football, getting harassed by a coach that demanded excellence, and you're just sitting there like, man, like I know what life or death is. Like I'm good, And so like I can't imagine, and for Neyland too. I mean, Neyland was, right there as well. So like I just can't imagine the adjustment coming back home and playing. But and I'm sure they had a blast and it was fun and everything. But like, just talk about a culture shock leaving and then a culture shock coming home as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, some of the guys, that I mentioned in the story, Walter Slater was a navigator on a B-24 bomber. Bill Gold was a pilot on a B-29. And then Dick Huffman was a Marine who was injured in the Pacific. So, you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, that's some pretty brutal stuff. And then to come back and play football. And I think, a story in here that really showed the challenge that Neyland was facing was Tennessee. 1946, they weren't bad. They won 7 games. They were 7-2. They went to the Orange Bowl to play Rice. Those older veteran guys did not want to go to that bowl game. They actually had a vote to not go because they said, we got wife and kids now. We've been to these bowl games before. It's not really that big of a deal to us anymore. Neyland made sure they revoted. That time the team decided to take the bowl bid, and then the players came to him again and said, can we bring our families? He said, no, that's a school issue. They don't want you to bring your families. And I don't think I included in the story, but man, they were really mad when they got down there and found out Rice had let their veteran guys bring their wife and kids. So I don't know. This may be a normal situation at BYU even now, but for Tennessee in the 1940s, it was certainly a challenge to kind of look at those guys as football players, because I mean, like you said, at that point, they were more than that. And so there were a lot of challenges coming back for him. And 46, again, wasn't a bad year, but 47 wasn't great. 48, they were both 500 seasons. Tennessee at 48 was particularly bad. Tennessee was blown out by Georgia Tech, who was coached by Bobby Dada, a former Tennessee player under Neyland, and 27-0 in Atlanta. They lose to Vanderbilt at the end of the 48 season. And there was, it's hard to believe because, the way, General Neyland is so revered at Tennessee, and the guy's got a street and a stadium named after him and a big statue in front of the athletic facility, that there were, people were complaining at that point because he was so committed to the single wing. The T formation after the war was the thing in college football. Everybody was running it. Neyland was very committed to the single wing. He wanted to keep, he had a lot of success with it in the 30s, and he wanted to keep doing it. and people just thought maybe it kind of run its course, and maybe it was time for something new. And that 48 season was particularly hard because his wife even was kind of pushing him to retire. They had just bought some land in Florida. She thought this was a good time. They're not really happy with you here anymore. But what kept him, decided ultimately for him to stay was he had a freshman class coming in that had Hank Loricella, Jimmy Hahn, Harold Payne, Jim Haslam, a lot of big names, Andy Kozar, that he felt confident would turn it around. And I thought what was great about it was he stuck to it. He still did it his way, and it turned out to pay off for Tennessee because the 49 was a good year, but 50 and 51 are two of the best seasons in Tennessee football, and one of those you get a consensus national championship.
Yeah, I got a shirt back there. I don't see. Yep, Home Field Apparel. See that box? Yeah, there's a T-shirt in there that's throwback, vintage, and it's like national championships. Got all those dates listed down there, and I'm like, yeah, it definitely paid off. I've already kept in the overtime here real quick. Neyland was you got a quote in here from, and I love this, Knoxville Journal writer Lindsey Nelson. You got the general giving a quote to Lindsey Nelson, the two volunteer legends. But it says, quote, this is when he got home following his second, tour of duty, or second deployment, I should say. Quote, there have been a few minor changes, but the old place still looks about the same. It's certainly fine to be going back to Knoxville again. He was standing looking at Neyland Stadium when he got back, and I guess that was 1944.
Oh, 46, yeah. So
46.
He got back on January 31st, 46, and he still had some requirements to meet with the Army even after that. But I love that too. Finding that it was like a one-on-one exclusive. Lindsey Nelson, who was also a war hero himself, he had served in the Army as well in World War II, and he got back and was assigned to the Tennessee beat, and obviously those two a few years later would create the Vol network as well. So I love that too. That was great. It was great to find that article in there, and I love too Neyland had been at the China Burma India theater during the war, which was not a very glamorous position to be in. You were moving a lot of Allied supplies through some rough terrain, and that was where he was at. And when he's talking to Lindsey Nelson, they're driving around Knoxville. This is all in the car, and it said in the article, Lindsey Nelson pointed it out, that he had to swerve a couple times to miss cars because he wasn't used to being back on that side of the road. And it had been different in Asia for him for 4 years. So it was an adjustment, not just to football, but life as well for him when he got back here.
Yeah, I could imagine that driving on the opposite road thing, that's enough to mess with anybody. Yeah, the first time that he was called away, it was 1935. He was called back to active duty in Panama. Came back in 1936, led Tennessee to SEC championships in 38, 39, and 40. And again, he was called away in 41, came back in 46. General Neyland, a couple of different hiatuses in his Tennessee career, but obviously for good reason. And, the general, most successful coach ever to coach here in Knoxville, Tennessee. All right, really great article. Just the tip of the iceberg right here. 80th year anniversary to the end of World War II, how that affected here, how that affected Tennessee, the players, the families, the program. Awesome stuff here from Noah Taylor, Neyland Press Corps. Go check out his Substack, read this stuff, support his work. Awesome stuff, again, stories like this and so many more. That's Neyland Press Corps. Noah, as always, man, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Great show. Really enjoyed my conversations with Noah Taylor. Very interesting topic. Again, I encourage you guys to go check out that article he wrote on Substack. Really interesting stuff if you're into the history stuff, especially, linking that with Tennessee football. That's what Noah's all about with Neyland Press Corps. Good chat with my buddy Jay Sandos. Can call him a buddy now, right? We talked here on Locked On Vols. We're all friends. Getting to know ETSU and kind of the mindset heading into this game at Neyland Stadium. And, of course, Joey Aguilar's past experience against ETSU. Spoiler, it was pretty good. Expecting more big things from Joey Aguilar on Saturday as well. Boogie Bentley coming up on tomorrow's show. I'll give you my keys, some players that I'm looking out for in a game that should be emptying the bench for the Tennessee Volunteers. All that and more for the home opener coming up this Saturday, 3:30. Tennessee taking on ETSU. Appreciate you guys for being here, making Locked On Vols your first listen, your first watch every single morning. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day. Every dayers could not do this show without you. Thank you so much. Same time, same place. Let's do it again tomorrow, everybody. This is Locked On Vols.